My brother Merv will definitely be.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome along. It is Inspire and Be Inspired. Back after a couple of weeks break. It's the middle of summer 2023. It's nice to have your company. As always, I begin by checking that the broadcast is working fine. There's no stuttering. Everything appears to be working wonderfully. And I have a great guest for you today. I'm going to bring him straight on. Mr. Dave Lynn from Music Without Labels. Good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
Good afternoon, Andy. I'm well, thank you. I'm honoured to be here. Really
well,
am.
It's my pleasure. And as a change to the usual proceedings, when I normally get straight into the interview, I'm going to take a few seconds to talk about what the channel's hoped to achieve in the last couple of years, and how I've done that. I always invite anyone that's watching us live to leave any comments. People who are coming back and checking out the recording, always feel free to leave a comment yourself. I can see Boone DJ says, "Good evening, fellas." So he's
Boone,
with us
brother Boone.
Nice and early. Thank you for your comments, as does Jane Whittingham. And again, everybody else, feel free to say hi. And I want to make you as included in this conversation as possible. So, David, with your permission, let me take 2 minutes just to do a very brief recap on what we're about. Inspire and Be Inspired started off really as a means for me to piece together a broken memory, trying to piece together some of the early days in Birmingham. I started out on the scene on the Aldea circuit, going out and clubbing, way before I expected to be a DJ, way before DJing was part of my plans. And then subsequently, I did become a DJ, and I've made friends with a lot of famous DJs, fantastic producers around the world. And over the last 2 years, I've done my best to try and bring some of them onto the stream to document their histories. And David was... so actually, Dave, is it David, Dave? What do you prefer?
I don't mind. My family call me D.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Your closest friends, how do they call you?
Many names. Yeah. More currently, I'm affectionately known as the Dark Lord of Wonky.
That's a bit
because
much,
of my
to be fair.
Musical choices. But generally, it's Dave, David, D.
Okay, so let's go with Dave. Dave came onto my radar after commenting on some of the pictures, some of the videos that I've been conducting, some of the interviews I've been conducting, and very graciously leaving comments here and there. Now, I actually thought that I was communicating with Graham Grumpy Brown because I'm aware of the Music Without Labels logo, and somewhere down the line, I think Dave must have introduced himself, and I realised there were two different people. Now, over the course of the month, Dave has watched a lot of my interviews, commented on a lot of the conversations that I've had, and it's very clear that he has an interest in history himself. So I thought it only fair to bring him on to say thank you for participating so much in the chats, and also to shed some light on his own history. Do you think that's a decent recap for us to get into it today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, generally speaking, most of the comments were for people that I know and have known for decades. You know, Colin Curtis, the good Dr. Bob Jones, Alex, and also some people that I'm surprised. I think I've said it to you before. Our paths have never crossed, but it's really strange because we know the same people and we have frequented the same clubs. But
and yet you and I have never spoken face to face.
No, very, very strange. But yeah, it's a real insight. You know, just some of the latest ones with Chili Funk guys. It's always good to fill in the gaps because we've known them as acquaintances, friends, or people within the music industry for decades. And there's a side of them that you don't get to know because we only see them at clubs and or kind of musical social events.
That's right. Well, I'm always keen to say when we conduct these interviews, I'm not a big fan. Having worked on the radio for 20 plus years, having done numerous interviews all research and whatever. Nowadays, this is just a little bit of fun. It's quite important to document the history. So I'm the first to put my hands up and say I put zero research into these interviews. I like it to be as relaxed and as natural as possible. And sometimes we do pull out information that we weren't expecting to. More often than not, people do say afterwards, "Oh, I didn't talk about this, I didn't talk about that." But we can always bring people on again to fill in the gaps, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the important thing, as always, is to make this as interactive as I can. So let me welcome along Jane Harrop, who calls you the Charmer. Roxana says good evening. Jimmy Who, how are you, brother? He's a big supporter of the stream also, and so is Emily. So thank you all for watching. Okay then, Dave. So I have zero leads that I can go to ask you about your history or whatever. So I am relying entirely on yourself to paint the picture of Mr. Dave Lynn. Where do we begin? Where were you born? When
I was born in Falmouth, Jamaica.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm one of four brothers. And yeah, musically, my father was a prolific music collector, varied taste. Obviously, coming from the West Indies, from Jim Reeves to Slim Whitman, from Keith and Enid to modern jazz recordings. So musically, I was quite influenced by him. In fact, I can remember from Nat King Cole to Sarah Vaughan, and he had an okay voice. And he would be singing in the morning. And that was my introduction to jazz. It was from my father.
Mm-hmm.
My two elder brothers were also very prolific music-wise. In fact, my eldest brother would be considered the pre-runner to what they call the elite dancers of today. So he would have been there before Trevor Shakes and those guys would have been maybe 4 or 5 years younger than him. So his group were quite prolific dancers. And then my younger brother, Mervyn, became, quite entrepreneurial in the music industry, kind of showcasing sales and marketing for Sony BMG, Motown, Arista, and also ran Sleeping Bag Records when they were UK based. So musically, it's always been around me. Okay. It was almost a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
I was already collecting.
Give us a rough year that you were born and when you relocated to the UK.
You see. Now Jane Whittingham will be listening with ears like that. I have this in joke that I have friends who don't know my age. And I return my
give me a 10-year window then between 55 and 65 you were born, I'd say.
I was born and I'm the same age as my tongue and older than my teeth.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an in joke.
Very well sidestepped. Well, yeah. I'm sure from the stories we'll be able to piece together.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. I have nothing about my age at all. It's just an in joke. But Jane Harrop and Jane Whittingham will be giggling now.
Yeah. Jane Whittingham.
You're this age or this age?
Jane Whittingham is saying, make him tell us. Okay, so when did you relocate to the UK? What year?
You see, you're very clever, Andy. It was a very good year.
Okay. Carry on then.
Yeah, we came over in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
It was when we arrived, I think winter was just about to start. And back then it was proper winters where the cars had to be shoveled out. That was a lasting memory of, I know it was coming up to my birthday and it started snowing. And obviously coming from Jamaica, it was the first time we saw snow. And we were out in the garden laughing and giggling. It's one of those childhood memories.
Did you struggle to not integrate, but did you struggle with the change in environment? or you loved it?
I think it was a full house. So having three brothers, and my father was very family orientated. No, not at all. Outside of the home, very, very different. Growing up in the 60s. But inside the home, no, not at all. Mm-hmm. My father was a very deep, spiritually guiding man. And somehow he just knew what we needed. Sometimes a little bit of a hard disciplinarian, but I think with four boys in the house, that was probably warranted. Yeah, there's lots of stories of... he was the kind of man where he practically rebuilt our home, putting in windows, like new windows, taking chimney breast down. Thinking back, I think, how on earth did you learn all of that, considering you left home at the age of 13? But he was able to do that. And a childhood memory would be relaying the patio at the back, and he had fresh cemented it down with the instructions, do not go out the back. Four boys running around the house, out the back, footprints. Who's been out there? Yeah.
Was there any bamboo lying around, or some curtain wire, or
yeah, whatever. I think we've had all the cliche sayings. I'll knock you into next week. Yeah, boy, you must be mad.
Okay, so what area was this?
In Edmonton,
okay,
North London. So yeah, it was, and it was. I do remember being out and being subjected to, what you later discover as you got older was racism, because we obviously didn't have it in Jamaica at all, which is quite diverse in Jamaica. So that was a bit of a shock. And as the area grew, the integration almost happened. It was quite subtle initially, but you knew which areas you could go to and which areas were not good to go to.
Mm-hmm. So do you have recollections of your older brothers being quite protective of you, and any scrapes that you would have got into? Not so much.
My older brother, yes, he was ultra protective and still is. He's kind of taken on the older brother role and always did. And oddly enough, he and another prolific dancer called Peter Darby, who I think was teaching in Covent Garden for a while. I think he's got a dance studio somewhere in the south of London, I think. They got beaten up in the club because they were dancing and the guys didn't like it because all the girls were watching them. I hate to say it, but it's a rite of passage if you were black growing up in the UK, you were subjected to abuse of some description. So I was quite shy, and I was quite bullied at school, or some schools, not all schools, until I learned to fight back. And then I was known as a psychopath. But really? I couldn't run. So there was no flight, it was fight. And I had to make sure that they could not come after me. So I went over the top.
Right.
Yeah. But I had a really bad moment. I think I was about 21, 22, and it changed me forever. I then started learning martial arts really to keep myself calm, because it was not a good time.
Okay.
Not a good time.
Well, so there's quite a few years there. Let me say good afternoon to Rosie in Chicago. She says, hi, Sir Dave. Rosie Suzanne. Okay, so you mentioned about 2021. I'm going to bring you back ever so slightly and just focus ever so briefly on information that I gleaned when we were talking, just doing the test. You were saying you were very active as a youngster, and you got yourself into a lot of scrapes, and somewhere along the line you injured yourself So because I think this will put a context into the rest of the conversation as well, right?
Okay, so yeah, I in terms of my recollection, at a very, very young age, pretty much from the age of whenever till I think I was about 5 or 6, I was running around like any other child. And having 2 older brothers, I followed them around. You know, we were quite close-knit growing up. And whatever they did, I also wanted to do. So if they jumped off of walls, I had to somersault off of a wall. If they climbed a tree, I wanted to climb a tree higher. And I do remember 3 specific injuries. One was jumping off of a wardrobe onto the bed and doing a somersault and cracking the back of my head open. And I still have the scar to this day on the back of my head. One was jumping off of the veranda at our home in Jamaica, and again doing somersault. And I landed on the front of my head. And I do remember being blind for a period of time. I actually remember my grandmother saying, "Open your eyes," or whatever it was being said. As a child, I wasn't really scared. I just think you learn to adapt as a child. The periods when these happened, I couldn't give you a specific time. There was another injury that I also recall. We used to clock ourselves running around the house. Jamaica was prolific with runners. So any prestige runner was always plastered on billboards all over the place. So running was part of our games. Okay. And I remember running around the house, clocking whatever time it was, and then doing it again and tripping over and splitting my kneecap open. It was so bad, I could see what would be the kneecap, which was white and then filled with blood. And I still have that scar to this day.
Wow.
And then the last one that I remember was being stung on the bottom of my foot by a bee or a wasp, and it became inflamed. And I also have a scar to this day on the side of my foot. And I like to think those injuries combined created what became my disability. And I think switching back, modern day medicine would have handled it in a different way today than they did back then. Because it was an unknown, I think it was signals being sent by my brain to my leg. That was the problem. And they orchestrated surgery. Mm-hmm. as the mechanism for repairing whatever they thought was wrong. And all those surgeries that I had just made things worse.
Right.
From being able to run and walk with a slight limp up to the age of 7, I then came out of that surgery needing a walking stick. And then by the time I was 10 or 11, I was in a wheelchair.
Okay. So the reason why I wanted to cover that was because I'm sure there will be people who see this who may never have had the opportunity to have that conversation with you. But the important thing is, as we've been conversing for so long, I wasn't even aware of the situation. So that doesn't define you. It isn't who you are. And you had said that there would have been many times you were out dancing. People wouldn't have even realised that you were in a chair. You used a stick or whatever. So it's nice to actually be able to get that explained and then put to the side.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. So we had skipped forward to you saying about you went a little bit loco, so to speak, at the age of 20, 21. But before then, your defining years, the ages 14, 15, 16, in an ever-changing landscape in the UK, musically, socially. There must, tell us about that period. Was there work? Yeah. Was there discos, reggae sound systems? Paint us a picture.
I think we had it all from reggae sound system. I think reggae sound systems was the first that I remember. been taken to blues parties, when you go into a house that you think, how big is this house? You go through room after room after room, and then you're in the back. Heavy ganja smells everywhere. Music's just pumping. And these parties seem to last for days. So I have memories of that. I have memories of local discos. At that age, we would have gone to Craig Park Youth Centre in Tottenham. And that was a kind of a stomping ground, because they would have parties there. My elder brother and his friends, they would often practice dance routines there. So that, again, is another memory. But music was, excuse me, music was always present. You know, whether it's reggae, ska, jazz, soul, country and western, always. And I can't really define any specific triggers that said, yeah, this is what I want to do. It's just, if we liked a particular record, we would go and buy it. My two older brothers had record collections themselves. So until they moved out, we could listen to their music. So I can't think of a specific switch that made me, no, I'll tell a lie. It would have been when my younger brother fulfilled my father's wishes and became an engineer. So he passed his apprenticeship and said, I've done what you asked. I'm now going to pursue my own career, and started working in a record shop. I think he did a few other things in between that before he started working in the record shop. And that, I think that was the point, because then I would go to the record shop and buy the odd thing here or there. I think that's a defining time. Mm-hmm. Age-wise, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. It possibly late teens, early 20s.
Okay, I get you. So you've painted a picture of us then, and for you to pay for these records, how are you doing that?
Yeah, I fulfilled my father's wishes. I remember having the conversation with him, because I wasn't aware of my disability. He never singled me out any differently. I would get the same kind of licks as my brothers would. And I remember him saying to me, what do you want to do? And I went, I want to be a soldier. And he went, you can't be a soldier. You can't be a soldier. You need a desk job, because you can't be like your brothers. If your brothers lose their jobs, they can go on the building site and still earn money labouring. You can't do that. So I trained as an accountant and became part qualified as a management accountant, and then switched to IT in my early 20s. So yeah, I was working in an accounts office pretty much since I left school, and carried on further education in college.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, repeating what I always say, it's going to be impossible for us to cover every twist and turn, every important moment in time that would have taken us from the 70s into the 80s. Again, a really important moment. But now we're starting to talk about important nightclubs. We're starting to talk about influential DJs in person and on the radio. Everyone has more or less the same tale to tell, but we still need to hear it from you as well.
Yeah, I would say Radio Caroline, really the standards in terms of the music that we liked. We would go searching for it. Greg Edwards, Robbie Vincent, Peter Young, and then in later years, people like Dr. Bob Jones, Norman Jay, Judge Jules. Mm-hmm. It just what was readily available. I remember defining moments of Kiss getting their license, and the music being exciting and then changing. I remember Jeff Young being on Radio 1 and feeling very excited about that. And then in later years, Pete Tong, even Tim Westwood. wherever we could find it, because it wasn't readily available on the radio, we would listen, tune in and listen.
Mm-hmm. I get it. Well, obviously, many names that you would have skipped over there. But Boone is saying we all served our apprenticeship at Harham in Enfield, just like Merv, and he also reiterates Dr. Bob and then throws in Giles Peterson.
I was just about to say Giles, for me, apart from obviously Paul Murphy, Baz for Jazz, Chris Bangs. In terms, the jazz was my draw. That's what I like. So Giles, I think, changed the landscape. He and Chris Bangs combined with, I always say this, Dr. Bob was very much part of that. And the influence was really there in the early years. But I would say, without a doubt, those were defining moments in terms of music.
As someone that's was very much focused on house music in my early years, even though it would have been just 1 or 2 years after yourself. I find it difficult to relate to the pull. I have no knowledge of Giles's early years. You say he kind of changed the landscape. What was it that he did? He looked for different sounds. He introduced. He pushed further to try and find new artists. How did he change the game?
I would say
and people like him.
Yeah, Giles, Chris Bangs, Dr. Bob, they made jazz accessible to lots of people who thought they didn't like jazz. And by default, as they started being introduced to some of these artists, that really you couldn't define their music. There was a dance scene that was created as a result of that. Yes, obviously you had the jazz dancers that followed Paul Murphy, but you also had people who would follow Giles and Chris with what they were playing. So I think the landscape was changed because what they did, they introduced jazz to so many people who then started going to the clubs, and the scene was grown out of that, and still is. You know, he's still on his quest to develop music in different ways. And the genre, for want of a better word, could you label it jazz, or is it just great music?
Mm-hmm. Well, Jane, I'll keep mentioning them by full name because there are two Janes. Jane Whittingham says they brought the world to us. I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you weren't a collector of music, then you wouldn't know about a lot of these items. But what they were able to do was to a prime example. I don't know if you can see it. Johnny Lytle, Salim, which is a track synonymous with Dr. Bob Jones. Giles and Chris and Dr. Bob were able to bring that to such a mass of people. It's one of those tracks that is a Dingwall's anthem. Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of thing that they were able to do. You know, if you look at the demographics of Dingwall's and the people that went to Dingwall's on a Sunday, and you're still getting that now, that's their creation.
Mm-hmm. So when we're having these conversations, the audience that we're predominantly reaching out to will be with you every step of the way. They will relate to this, and it's pointless me pretending that I'm talking to kids who had no idea of what was going on back then. Eventually in the archive someone may come across this, so it's a bit of a redundant point to make that it's difficult to try and comprehend how small the world was relatively in comparison to now with regards to the information readily available, as you say, with regards to music. And so it was, you say, they pushed music to the masses. It was still a micro scene, relatively speaking.
Absolutely, yeah. We often, I think it's much bigger now, particularly as we have the internet. You know, you have pockets of it all around the world. But back then, we thought we were in this scene, rising to the masses of Southport. we had thousands of people. But because you're amongst thousands of people, you think it's bigger than what it is. It's still, even now, it's still quite small in comparison. But yeah, I think I can look back on, there were certain gigs that would have, and these were regular gigs, that would have, I don't know, 120, 130 people on a regular basis. And that's quite hard to do for a small gig. And then if you roll that forward to the likes of, you know, these people are all influential and all part of the scene. So Chris Bangs, Giles, the Cock Happy gigs, Patrick Falls and Giles with Dingwalls. You had Dr. Bob with the surgery, Colin Curtis as well from the North doing his bit. I'm going to forget names, but people like Nicky Holloway. Now you have to think of Nicky Holloway and Bob Masters putting on gigs at Regent's Park Zoo, London Museum, Rocket. These were organic things that were created out of a slightly left field scene. So, yeah, I think they're all part of that growth.
Well, you mentioned Bob Masters there. I had the pleasure of spending an hour or so with him on a minibus in Croatia a couple of weeks ago, and just scratching the surface on the incredible amount of things that he's done. He's been responsible for. So he's definitely someone I'm going to strive to bring onto the channel. Not really on my scene, so to speak, and I've always focused on people within my network. But as time progresses and as more names get mentioned and I get to meet these characters, it is interesting, although I'm sure those stories have been told a million times. So at this point, you mentioned about the zoo, because when I had advertised that I was going to be talking to you, one of my friends had said, "Oh, I remember Dave from the zoo." Was that as a punter, or were you actually
as a punter?
You weren't playing records at this point.
Well, not publicly.
Publicly, no.
Yeah, but yeah, from the zoo, and again, it's one of those things. I'm easily distinguishable. So over the decades, there are lots of people who go, "Who is that guy?" And they'll know me. Faces wise, yeah, I always remember the faces. Not so much with the names. And you come across so many people, but many of them have remained acquaintances, friends, contacts that we still see on the scene. We talk on a fairly regular basis. So, yeah. Lifelong friends. In fact, here's a story, and I'm sure Bob will fill this in more detail. When he started the Ibiza Soul Week again, which was 2013, I think it was, we were standing outside the Café Del Mar, and it was one of those moments that was so emotional. And he said, "I can't believe we're doing this. We're here." And we were here 30 years ago, when Special Branch first went to Ibiza. This is when Mambo wasn't even built. You know, Café Del Mar was just a rock. It's unbelievable. And it's one of those moments that is quite emotional.
It is.
We are blessed. I say it often, we're blessed that we're still here doing this.
Boone is confirming it was 2013.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does the change, and you actually, was it confidence that you needed to actually start playing the music publicly, or what was the natural progression for you to become the DJ? I had friends, and my younger brother was DJing quite a lot. I mean, by the time he'd left Hiram's, he joined Blues and Soul. So he was going around the country doing write-ups and various other things, and he was DJing and doing quite big gigs. So I went along on a number of these gigs. We'd arrange coach parties. This was back in the days, you'd organise a coach and go to a venue. I had friends, people like Tony Fernandez, you'd probably not come across,
that DJ'd on a regular basis, had residencies. And it happened almost by chance.
I'm sure I actually just saw was Tony recently at Margate?
Yes, he was.
I did see a photo with him tagged in it, the 3 characters in the photograph.
Yeah.
Carry on anyway.
So I think what happened was there was a residency at a wine bar called Blues in Waltham Cross, not that far from where we lived at the time. We were living in Enfield by then. And we used to go to Blues Wine Bar. Brilliant little place. And the owner, or there were 2 sets of owners. The first owners and the second owners loved the music. And obviously, people came from all over. It wasn't just local. They would travel.
Okay, so forgive me. Was the wine bar already working and you took it on, or you created the evening?
It was created by Merv and Tony Fernandez.
Okay,
they were the ones that were, they were the ones that were DJing there. And we really had such great times there. And quite often we would do a Friday at the wine bar. And back then they would close early. And then we would drive to the gold mine in Canvey Island and go and party all night down there. Sometimes sleep in the car or drive back. When the wine bar closed, we missed it so much. We then found another wine bar, but I was DJing by then. Don't ask me how or why. I was DJing by then. It just organically happened. And I started running the night at the wine bar. I think it was a Monday night at a wine bar called, was it DJs or Wine Lights? Something like that. Boom will.
Okay. Are you able to give me a year on this?
My guess is I was then driving a gold E30 BMW, so 84.
Okay. And I'm also being asked to remind you of what a wonderful chauffeur and bodyguard you had. Just to throw that in there.
Brother Boone.
Okay, so we're talking about mid-80s. So the music you would have been playing, purely soul and jazz, or only jazz?
Soul and jazz. Mm-hmm. Modern soul.
When Northern soul. Okay, so not
modern independent soul. Not so much on the northern side, but
modern. I thought I heard you say northern. So
kind of back then. Although jazz was my love, and the clubs that we were I was DJing in, you could not do an out-and-out jazz set. You had to mix it up. So you drop in modern soul, independent soul, and the jazz and a bit of funk.
Give me your interpretation of just one artist that would fall into the modern soul category. The first person that springs to mind.
Lou Curtin.
Okay.
Yeah. Eugene Record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So definitely on the underground, nowhere near tickling the pop crossover you lose.
No.
George Benson's
no. Beloyd, those are those kind of people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so how was the night received?
I've been very, very lucky. Grumps, Graham Grumpy Brown, he and I talk almost daily. And he will say, it's your smile. You have that smile people are drawn to, and you get away with so much because of it. And I went, what, not my talent? And he went, well, yeah, of course that. But I've been very, very lucky that when I've played, it's been well received. I think I've only ever cleared the dance floor once.
Okay, so how long did this continue for?
Oh,
the residency at the bar.
Right through to 2003.
At the wine bar?
No, sorry. I thought you meant DJ wise.
No.
I think we did that for at least 3, maybe 4 years. Yeah. And by then, within that time, I'll always have Bob Cosby, who is another prolific DJ that seems to be below the radar in terms of fame and fortune, for want of a better word, but very much part of the scene. He was the first person to officially book me. And I played at a gig that he did at Black Horse on a Tuesday night in Leighton Buzzard. And that was my first official booking. Didn't get paid, but I did get a free drink. And then from there, I went to Tudor Oaks. That was off the A1, and that was run by Tommy Wilkinson, who used to do Splash. That was the name of the gig. And he's had, Brandon Block and all sorts there, but he'd have 2 floors. So upstairs was the alternative room, and then downstairs was the main room. And then from there, I went to Caster, and I DJ'd at Caster for at least 8-9 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And radio in between that. Hardcore FM, Caster Soul Radio. Hardcore FM was a pirate radio station that I was on for at least 3 years. Just so much. I'm trying to remember it all, but yeah.
It is. So this is rolling in towards the back end of the 80s as well. The ladies, Emily says, you've got to have a cracking smile all day long. I think you've charmed her. And Jane Wintingham also throws in there that your authenticity helps you along the way. And Boone is saying at Baldock. I'm sure that will mean something to you.
Yeah, that's the A1 up, Baldock, not Letchworth, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trying to fill in all the things. I in between all of that, Tony Fernandez and I ran our own night for at least 5 years in Enfield with a gig called Tales by the Riverbank. And we had Kev Beadle there, Gavin Page. I know Grumps was there one night, but I don't think he DJ'd. But yeah, I've completely forgotten about that. And also writing for a magazine, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, but I'm sure I've got copies of it. I actually wrote a column, the jazz column.
Okay. And so tell us about how the jazz became more popular. The scene would have grew, and then actually it would have grown and slightly started to shrink with the resurgence, the growth of the acid house movement, the All Dayers scene that we've heard firsthand from many people down the years would have slowly started to draw the crowds away from some of those parties. So did you notice that yourself within your scene? Sorry, I'm just looking at myself here. I'm a little bit jittery for some reason, but it's not taken away from the audio. Carry on.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those, I have a distinct memory in terms of Caster ending as it was, which coincided with the end of a long-term relationship that I was in. And I had some real severe mental health issues. There were lots of things going on around my world that just I couldn't cope with. And I sold my vinyl collection, and I effectively retired from DJing.
Wow. How did that make you feel at that particular moment? Was it like, I don't give a shit about these anymore?
No.
You always knew it was a bad decision?
Yeah, it was a gradual thing, but selling the vinyl hurts me to this day. Even though I've got a bit of a collection, nothing compared to what I had, and it still pains me to this day.
Do you know where it went?
Bits and pieces. Well, I say bits and pieces. Gary Dennis bought a large chunk of it. I'm trying to remember the names of people. I can't remember the names, but I keep thinking Sounds of Blackness, but it's not. I can't remember their names, but they bought a lot of the soul side of things. So it was broken up and sold off. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we won't dwell on that.
No, please don't.
Tug at the heartstrings too much. Okay, well,
I was lucky in many ways that I recorded at least 70% of it. So I still had effectively quite a lot of my collection, and I kept some of the things that were very precious to me.
How did you record it?
Well, back then, I was an IT person.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I was able to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it was all digitized. It wasn't all on tape.
No, it was all digitized. Yeah, I was fortunate that I was able to do it. So there were times when there were albums that I recorded, and I wished I'd had the patience to break the tracks up. But some of them was just a full album. So if I'm playing any of those, I kind of have to use the fader to.
But that's easily done. That's easily done
nowadays. Yes.
Cut it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's still talk in the chat about your age. People are still hanging on every word, waiting for a slip of the tongue to, like an actual pinpoint in the roadmap, so to speak.
My retort to that would be, "Come on, friends, you've known me for decades. You know how sharp I am. I'm not going to slip up." Even when I've had a drink.
Wonderful. Well, I'm actually questioning myself now whether or not I actually put too many years on you. So anyway, that's by the by. So where are we going with the conversation now? Where do you feel we need to?
Well, I would say in terms of leading up to Music Without Labels. Okay. So from 2003.
Let me pause you there at 2003 because you've already mentioned Graham Grumpy Brown. How does your relationship begin?
We've known each other. We go back to the 80s, the Goldmine, the Bullet Royston, gigs in Essex. I can't remember some of the names of them, but Chris Hill had a place. Stage 3 that Thomas Felton was managing. So we go back a long, long way. K-Star, because he worked with Graham Joyce. I don't know if you know who Graham Joyce is. Graham Joyce was basically the go-to marketing person for T-shirts and merchandise for artists. Okay. So Mays, Bobby Womack, etc. He was the person that they would go to, and he ran the T-shirt stall at K-Star for many, many years, and Grumps worked with him.
Okay, I get you.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, so that gives us some backstory. So then 2003, and I'm fully aware that there's just a whole chunk of history that we've totally skipped over there that we can't really get into now.
Maybe this is the first of a return. I have a second conversation with you. But I would think from 2003 until 2003, I then got into the digital world. Coming from an IT background, I was then aware of music being available digitally. So I was collecting purely for personal interest, and musically, I was going all over the place. Black Coffee. I'm trying to think of some of the artists back then that I was clear. Boone is better than this. He's a bit of an anorak when it comes to labels and artists because he's got that brain. But I was collecting purely for my own personal means. I loved music. And that's what I did. I wasn't aware of what was going on the scene. In my head, the scene had got quiet because K-Star had ended. I was aware Southport. I'd been to Southport a couple of times. I was aware of certain other gigs, but all the what I call the gigs that I went to, I didn't know if they were still going. I wasn't in contact with many of those people.
Were you starting to feel slightly out of the scene due to age, possibly?
No, it was more to do with obviously the friends group that we had, and we would go out en masse. We're all married with children, so they weren't going out as much, and we weren't collectively saying who's doing what. Let's all get together. I think lives changed. So people were raising children and various other things, looking after a home, making sure where the money was going.
And by 2003, were you back fully mentally fighting fit over the breakup and everything? Or were you still
it took me a while. Again, music was part of that century, as well as martial arts. I then... Sorry, a car was just going past. I don't know if you heard that or not.
Okay.
I then caught up with a martial art called Wing Chun, which is one of the ones that Bruce Lee studied initially. And then he filled in bits and called it Jeet Kune Do. And I immersed myself in the gym, Wing Chun, and music. That was pretty much my life, and my family and close friends. That was it for me. And I think what started it, I think this probably fitted in with lots and lots of other people's lives, particularly the ones that were frequenting the gigs that I went to. The likes of what's it called? I can't remember the name of it now.
I've no idea.
The Nicky Oliver was running that gig in London.
That's not Astoria.
No. I can't remember the name. It was Boone will remember the name of it. I'm pretty sure about that. Anyway, the people that went to that particular gig grew kind of Nicky's following, as well as the likes of Bob Masters and Dr. Bob and various other people as well. Bob then recreated the gig that he was synonymous with in the 80s, which was the Bournemouth Weekender. And he contacted me and said, we're doing a Bournemouth Weekender reunion. I'd really love you to come along. And I thought, yeah, okay, 2012, 10 years since I've been out, in the gig wise, and I went to that. It was unbelievable. It's like we've never been away, because we was catching up with people we've not seen, and certainly I've not seen for at least 10 years. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I remember it was either the Saturday morning or the Sunday morning. We were having breakfast, and Dr. Bob was there, Debs was there, a few other people. I can't remember who else was on that table, but it was people that we'd not seen in a while. And the doc said, where the hell have you been? I said, oh, life, blah, 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 blah. And he said, are you still playing or spinning? He calls it spinning. I went, no, I sold my collection. He said, you still collecting though? I went, oh, yeah, I'm still collecting. He said, you should come and do something. You had something to say. I loved what you did. I went, yeah, we'll see. The scene's changed. I don't have my vinyl anymore. He said, don't worry about that. People are using CDs now. I thought, okay. And then the following year, he called me and said, I've booked you to do the surgery. What? Yeah, you're coming to do the surgery. And that was in May 2013. And I did the surgery.
And how old were you there?
I think the same age as my tongue.
Right, carry on. I'm only joking. Yeah. Okay, so as you know, I spoke at length with Bob. So the surgery at this time, he'd brought it back and remind us where it was.
This was it's East-ish London.
Okay.
No, is it the back of Shoreditch? I think it was sort of on the other side of Shoreditch. I can't even remember the name of the road, which is really crazy. But it was the Village.
Okay.
That was the venue. And yeah, I remember being very, very nervous. very nervous. I was already in a new relationship by then, and I'd kind of worked out what I was going to play, not knowing what people listened to. I wasn't aware of internet radio. It was just that Bournemouth reunion opened my eyes, because I then learnt all of these things. Yes, there's Stomp Radio, there's this radio, there's My Soul Radio, and I went, really? I didn't know that, and I started tuning in and listening. The upshot was I did the gig, and I was playing the things that I liked, and I played the Black Coffee track, Superman, not knowing that Dr. Bob had introduced it to everyone a few years before, and it was kind of like his Salim. And I also played another track by a woman called Bushi Malango, called Way Baba. And he came up to me and said, "What is this?" I said, "Yeah, it's just this artist that I've been listening to." He went, "My God, that's something. How come I don't know about that?" And I'm thinking, "You're Dr. Bob." That created a stir. From that point on, Grumps, because we were kind of always in contact, said, "I want you to come on my show on Stomp and bring some tracks, and we'll do an open conversation." And that's what I did. And towards the end of the show, the 2-hour show, he said, "That's quite a selection of music you got there, Dave. There's no one particular genre. Why is that?" And I said, "Why does it need a genre? If it's good music, why does it need a genre? Just play it." And from that point on, Music Without Labels was born, because I said, "Why does it need a label?"
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's focus on the gig that you did. Playing to a dance floor, mainly people listening. Did you have to think about the records that you played and how they were received, or was it just like, well, this is what I'm playing, love it or not?
There was a little bit of that. And also with the brief that the doc had given me, he said, "Play exactly what you like. You don't have to worry about the dance floor, because we do that later."
Okay.
So yeah, I came with a free reign of just playing whatever I liked.
And did it was it received well for the dancers?
Apparently so.
Okay.
Apparently so. Yeah, which was always a nice thing. If people are receiving what you like, because that's really what
it takes. Some balls, doesn't it, to be able to stand there and just play with conviction the music. Well, this is my brief. I intend to share my soul with you, literally. Yeah. And and then if you're not focusing on the dance floor, having recently done it myself, we are known sometimes to second guess how things are being perceived and received. So fair play to you. So, okay, carry on then. So you did the radio show. And
so we did the radio show, and Music Without Labels as an idea was formed from that conversation. Why does good music have to have a label? And really it stems back to the days when there was a definite split in the scene. You mentioned the acid jazz, but you had the main room, which predominantly was playing Philly classics in essence, and then the rap or the hip hop scene emerged, and you had this division of DJs that said, "There's no way I'm playing that." And then you'd have the new emergence. People like Tony Fernandez would be happy to play Dougie Fresh, the show. So there was a split in the scene. There was definitely a split at what were Nicky Holloway's and Giles and Chris Bang's gigs, because the acid house scene was emerging. And I remember in my head, the music scene went like that. So you had the rave scene that basically developed itself with a completely new audience. And then
that was me.
Yeah. and then you had what I would call music connoisseurs, for want of a better word, those who've been brought up on a certain genre of music, whether it was Norman Jay and Judge Jules doing what they were doing, whether it's what Bob Masters was doing, or whatever the Doc was doing. And really the alternative room was the creation of people like Giles, Chris, and Dr. Bob. That's really the emergence of it, because they were keeping the connoisseurs of music entertained and said, okay, you can have 2 rooms in the venue. You can play your hip hop and whatever else as his main room music, which house, well, the house hadn't really developed really at that point, but they were continuing to play the connoisseurs music. So jazz, soul, whatever was. So that thought process was going on in my head. And I think it was a couple of weeks later, I was booked to do a gig by what's known as the Heavy Soul Boys in Cambridge. It might have been a month or 2 later. But I did that gig. And I then said to Grumps, I'm going to do my own gig. And he went, why on earth do you want to do that for? I said, because of what I'm into musically, I don't think people are going to book me. And he went, okay. And I found a venue and we started what is Music Without Labels.
Okay, so how big was the venue and what were your initial ideas of attendance?
The venue could hold 150, and attendance-wise, I hoped we'd get 100 people. The most we ever had in the 4 years that we ran it was 80, and the least we had was 30. It was hit and miss. We did it 4 times a year, and sometimes we'd get 40, 50 people. Sometimes we'd get 60, sometimes 70, sometimes 80.
Mm-hmm. So it was clearly not financially driven.
Draining. No.
Well, not draining. It wasn't motivated by earning money.
No.
So you wouldn't have felt deflated by that turnout.
No.
The people that came, forgive me for talking over you. The people that came, they were all happy. Were you able to build up a regular core of 20 or so that were there religiously, or did you get a lot of floaters, so to speak?
But what I like to think, or what Grumps and I like to think, and the MWO team, as I call them, we have a core base of about 120 people who generally, when we put a gig on, are the first ones to get the tickets within a very, very short space of time. And then we get repeat people who come along. This is in the latter section, which I'll explain in a moment. But yeah, certainly in the early days, there were 30 or 40 people who would come every time.
Religiously.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they liked it because it was so different musically. They were still on the club scene. They were going to clubs or weekenders. But to them, they loved it because they were with their friends, they're having a good dance. But musically, it wasn't sparking their interest.
Mm-hmm. And so you would have felt, as I continue, let me say good evening, Mark. Mark Goddard says hi.
Oh.
Been with you both from the start. Hello, my friend. And Jane Whittingham says, build it and they will come. Did you feel a responsibility to represent yourself, represent the music and stay true to your passion?
Yeah, a good friend came along to one of the gigs and gave me some very important advice. And the first thing he said was, what you've created as a brand is inspirational. And he wished he'd thought of it. He said, number 2, why do you want to do it? Do you think you've got something to say? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, that's a good reason to do it. And he said, I don't know why, but the reason why you're not having the success that you so greatly deserve is the venues, the location of the venue. You need a different venue. And Grumps and I discussed it. We weren't sure if that was right or not, but we started looking for a new venue and we found one. And then I came up with, right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I said to Grumps, what would you say if I told you we could book Gerardo Facina at an MWL gig in this new venue? And he went, I'll believe it when I'm standing next to him. And I've been talking to artists in my reclusive time for years, just exchanging music ideas and various other things. Again,
charming them.
Maybe it's my smile. I don't know what it is, but I do seem to get away with certain things. And I booked Gerardo. And we did, we called it A Night to Remember, because we never knew if we was going to do another one. We didn't know if it was going to be a success or not. It was a huge financial investment, kind of on my part. But it took off. The venue could hold 300 and we had 250, which was...
Are we 2014, 2015 now or still...
past Jane Whittingham will probably remember this better than I will. I would have said when we moved to the Rum and Sugar, it was probably 2015, 2016.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what was it that you believe made it a success? Alongside obviously a big name, was the venue a lot more conducive for the vibe you were trying to create?
Yeah, it was that, and also Jane's already touched on it. Build it, and they will come. But by then, I was doing a regular show on the radio, and what I was oozing out of my soul musically, people were listening to, and my audience was growing. So that cultivation, or the foundation, was being built upon. So by the time the concept was launched in the new venue with a big name, there were so many people already on board. I'd done various gigs here and there. It was the right time, the right moment, the right person, and it just...
So was it Music Without Labels, A Night to Remember, or just A Night to Remember?
Music Without Labels presents A Night to Remember. So the branding really comes from my brother Merv, who is a marketeer and a salesperson. And we were just having general brotherly chats as we do. And I mentioned what I was going to do, and he said, that's a really good name, but try and make it into a brand. And that's really...
And that's what it did.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Jane is backing you up and saying 2016 with a question mark. So then, off of the back of that, the frequency of repeat gigs, how did it progress? Yeah,
we were doing two MWL gigs at the Rum and Sugar in Canary Wharf a year. And I had a list of artists who wanted to play there as long as your arm. So we had Gerardo Facina, we had 3 times. We had Josh Milan, Christian Vinci, Vic Lavender, Albert Phillips, and Ralph Gum.
Okay. Across the board with all of those names.
Yeah, absolutely. And every single one of them. I mean, aside from UK DJs, obviously Grumps and I, the Doc is always part of that lineup. Paul Fawcett and Mark Blee, absolutely superb DJs on Soul Power. Steve Lehman, another fantastic DJ who, again, I just think, why is he not up here? Because he's just unbelievable. Birdie, Jeff Young, Ginger Tony, Paul Clark. We've invited Bob Masters a few times. He's been unable to make it. Boone has DJ'd there. Paul Bennett. I mean, I have a dream to do a weekender and invite all the DJs that have played for MWL for a weekender.
So what is preventing you from pursuing the dream and making it a reality?
That's a big investment financially. And I'm closer to retirement than I am from building a career.
I don't know. I think if you stick your neck on the line, I think if you believe with your pedigree, with the group of people that you know, your passion, I think if you reached out to a lot of those people that you just mentioned and told them what you wanted to do, told them how you wanted to do it, and I'm sure everybody would come together and allow your dream to become a reality. You know.
Yeah.
I think you may be surprised. I think you should put pen to paper. I think you should. It may benefit you to put pen to paper and at least thrash out some ideas on paper. And when you actually start to look at it a little bit closer, it may be not as difficult or not as financially stressing as you believe.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. I think it's also good to have good network of people who are very open. I generally tend to only have what I call positive, beautiful souls around me, and I interact with those type of people. People like Amanda Frontani, based in New York. I mean, she's very close to Josh. I think she does a lot of his marketing and various other things. But having people like that and Albert Phillips to talk to from a musical point of view, I mean, it was the likes of Amanda Frontani, Shamrock Guitar, Albert and Josh, who was pushing me to say, you've got so much to say musically. Why don't you produce? I'm not a producer. No, you should. And lo and behold, I've had a number of edits released. I've had my own productions released. And you do sometimes have to pinch yourself and go, how is this all happening? It's just most bizarre. But I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have that. So it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Boone is saying, I personally should know a thing or two about putting on gigs. He sends some very pleasant words about Vocal Booth. Thank you, Boone. But yeah, definitely, you say about beautiful souls, working with like-minded people. As long as your intentions are pure and you reach out to the right people and share your vision with them, they would all be, because it will benefit everyone together. And so that's why just listening to the passion that you've got and listening to the angle that you want to take it, I have no doubt that you could make it work, and you will make it work.
We'll see. I think it's also important to have those same people. I mean, Jane Whittingham is one of them. Boone is definitely one of them. Grump. I'm often referred to as the runaway train, and Grumps is the brakes, because I go, yeah, let's go, and he goes, well, hang on a minute, let's just take a step back and think about this and think about that. Otherwise, I'll be down the track. And it's important to have people who are able to say, yeah, I really like that. Or if I'm doing a production and I give them a preview and they'll go, that bit's not quite right. Because you can get so personal and emotional with a track, you often have to step away from it for a while. So I think it's important to have people like that around you, as opposed to those who always go, oh, this is wonderful, it's the best thing ever, and you get fed with that and you get lost, and then you put it out to the world and they go, what the hell is this?
Mm-hmm. Dare to dream, my friend. Dare to dream.
Yeah, very true. It's very
Dare
true.
to dream. Okay, so we are continuing along the timeline. I want to thank everyone for still being here. Mark says positive words. Well, yeah, as I say, having experienced that myself, having a vision, making it work, there are ups and downs. If you do it, in the correct way, there's no reason why it couldn't work. So let's continue with the timeline then. MWL gigs continued, radio shows and the like. So tell us about the last 5 to 7 years. I'm sure that will bring us up to lockdown and things would have progressed through there as well.
Well, yeah, I think rolling forward, and one of those other joyous moments, Bob Masters contacted me, and he would do often anyway. We'd have little chats here and there, but he contacted me and said, "I'd really like you to play Ibiza Soul Week." I was like, "Really?" And he went, "Yeah, I really like what you do." So that was 2016 as well.
Did he say you're a really cool cat?
No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't say that. He would. I'll tell you. He probably won't mind me saying this. He said, "I wouldn't be asking you if I didn't think you were capable of doing it. You have something to say musically, and more importantly, your very presence is liked by lots of people."
I praise indeed.
It's a nice thing to hear. So Ibiza Soul Week, unbelievable, and I've been blessed to have done that since then. So I've been on the bill since then. He's also booked me for a number of his Madness gigs, which have been unbelievable again. I kind of, in my head, I limit myself to 5 or 6 gigs a year, and that would be including my own gigs. I don't want to be out every week or every month. So I probably turn down maybe 3 gigs a year.
Why?
Because what I want to play, I know will not work at those particular gigs. And I did succumb once and went, yeah, I'll do it. And threw a figure out, thinking that they would say no way. And they went, yes, yes, yes. And I went, filled the dance floor. But the one things that you come away with is the negatives. Full dance floor, people are having a good time. And 2 people who will say, oh, I don't like that. Can you play this? Or whatever it is. Those are the ones you remember. And I'm still remembering it now rather than the full dance floor. It's crazy.
So the full dance floor, was that off the back of you playing exactly how you wanted to play? Or okay, so you weren't coming away thinking, I didn't do myself justice there. I kind of played it safe.
Jane Whittingham will tell you, on the whole, I think maybe one set, which I think was this year at the Cotswold Park, where she said, I really liked it, but I think you play too much of this. Because she's one of my staunch critics. Mm-hmm. She's a dance floor music aficionado. But generally, her view is you don't give an inch. There's no compromise with you. You come along and you go, this is it. That's my.
And so by keeping your gigs limited, you feel that you can go out there, continue with the authenticity, come away feeling fulfilled that you have represented yourself well. I completely relate to that, because there were many times when I came away from a dance floor feeling quite empty after smashing a party, but not feeling fulfilled inside. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I think I've summed it up in many ways. I mean, you were on a slightly different scene. So let's say, I'm sure you know this. Can you remember the very first time you heard Roy Ayers Running Away?
Not necessarily, but...
Well, think of an era of a track.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Gil Scott Heron, The Bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the first time you heard that, I would hope you would have gone, wow, this is really good. Or I wonder what this is. And maybe stirred you enough to go and find it yourself. I mean, you've come at it from the house scene, which is slightly different, but that's one of the things that I try to create. So if I go to a gig, I don't want to come away from the gig going, yeah, I had a really good time. My friends were there. We had a couple of drinks, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we nod our heads or whatever. I didn't come away from it going, what was that track? I've got to find that track. Because that can be quite rare.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only, again, I don't go to every gig. There's only a handful of people who still continue to do that. And I want to be one of those people where they go, my God, what was that track? Because they can't find it on Shazam. So it's...
Well, yeah, again, I completely get that. And there was a time where I also felt like that. And then as soon as that desire for me to be that person waned, I hung up my headphones because I didn't feel I was doing myself a service by going out and trying to find those records that made people go, oh my Lord, you know, this is incredible. I still love the music that I play, but that desire for me to find those records that other people don't necessarily know what wasn't there, if you know what I mean. I think it's a big ask is the word I'm trying to find, to be able to continue to do that. There's a huge responsibility there to be able to do that.
I also think, well, yeah, I think desire is a good word, because the moment that the desire for me to not want to go looking, because there is just so much music out there, and my ears are fully open. There are things that I play that my peers, the grumps, would say, I don't know about that, Dave. Not necessarily for a dance floor, but just generally playing it. I get that all the time. But
is that because it's too far left or right of what people expect music to be? And is there the opportunity sometimes to try and be too left field, away from the norm, and actually someone who has your ear, like James, actually, no, that is absolutely terrible. Why are you playing that? You've got that completely wrong.
Well, this came up in the conversation, actually, and I'm trying to remember the exact words. The exact words were, I won't kind of name drop, but I had the call and they said, I really like what you do. I've been listening on and off for a couple of years. And I want to ask you, do you purposely go out of your way to find obscurity just for the sake of it? Or are you drawn to it because you genuinely like it? And it's got to be, the answer is I genuinely like it. I don't go actively searching, going, oh, it's got to be right at the bottom. No, that's not what I do. I hear something that might send me off in a different direction, and there's something in there that I think, yeah, I like that. I'm going to play it because I like it, not because it fits into the mold. It's because I like it.
That's a great confidence. Would you say that you've ever? Well, I'm going to answer my own question. It doesn't sound like you've ever struggled with confidence around your choice of music. Then, no,
I've had moments when leading up to Margate. So running off the back of the last MWL, A Night to Remember, I wasn't very well, unfortunately, and I had to end the gig or my set. I played 3 tracks and had to go home. But it actually worked out okay because we had the train strike and various other... So people wanted to get home anyway, or some did. And leading up to Margate, I spoke to Jane Whittingham, and as a sound barrier. And I said, I don't know why, but I just don't think that what I would have been playing is going to work at Margate. Now, bearing in mind, I've played, not actually part of Margate Soul Festival, but I did the Lighthouse, which is where I was going to play 2 years before, just coming out of lockdown, and it worked. And I don't know why, but I just suddenly had this moment when I thought, I don't think what I want to do is going to work. And she just went, pull yourself together. Come on, it's you. You got to be who you are. I went, yeah, you're right, actually. Because if I go and do what I'm not feeling, it's going to come across. Mm-hmm. You know, people often say, I've watched you DJ. Are you putting all of that stuff on? I said, no, when I'm doing the radio, I'm doing exactly the same. If I hear a track sometimes, because of the fast pace and I'm working, I'll only hear maybe the beginning, the middle, and the end of a track. And I'll go, yeah, I'm going to play that on the show. So when I'm hearing it, I'm going, oh my God, this is, and I'm away. So I do that at home. And I sometimes forget when I'm DJing live, it's like I'm in my own playing to myself, and I'm lost. And the floor, I'm feeling the energy, but I'm not seeing it, if that makes sense. It's a very strange thing. But yeah.
Talk me through putting on a record that you absolutely love that doesn't get the reaction that you expect. What is your thought process then with the next record that you select? You continue regardless?
Yeah.
Or do you don't feel a responsibility, maybe the wrong word, aware of, okay, well, I do have a job to do per se. I'm here for the dancers. And this is a completely different conversation for another time that maybe yourself and one of your peers can come on and have. Who's in charge, the dancer or the DJ? You know what I mean?
It's 50-50 without a doubt. There's the cliched thing that says a good DJ, I mean, not that I'm saying any of these things are me. A good DJ will keep a dance floor full. A great DJ will play music that you've never heard, that you wish you'd heard. So there is that element. You see, I put Dr. Bob and people like Colin Curtis as well in that category where they play things. I remember when Dr. Bob played African Music for African People by Shamrock Guitar at Bournemouth Weekender, and it was Saturday afternoon. I was actually on the landing upstairs and I heard the guitar riff and I went, what on earth's this? And I went downstairs and I was looking through the curtains at the dance floor, and for that second, you could hear a pin drop. The music was playing and people were going, what on earth? And then they were feeling it and then they were away. Dr. Bob still does that. And I think that's very important because that makes you come away from the gig going, what the hell was that?
My idea on that scenario is only certain DJs can get away with that. An unknown DJ possibly couldn't stand in that DJ booth and play a record that a crowd wasn't sure of and put their trust in the DJ and then go with it. That's my take on that. That could be incorrect, but that's just how I feel.
It's quite possible. I mean, I said it before. I've been quite blessed. Call it luck. Call it my smile.
We don't use luck on this show.
Yeah, whatever it is, and I don't like to say I get away with it. That's not the right word. But I've been blessed to have people buy into what I do and enjoy what I do.
Because you've earned your stripes, clearly.
We have a saying within my close friends group. It actually started on Soul Power Radio that I'm just average. I'm Dave. That's it. There's no, I've often said to my friends, if ever we have an in joke that because I played in Ibiza, I then said, well, I've played here and I've played there and I'm an international superstar DJ, and it's an in joke.
Uh-huh.
But also there's a bit of, oh my God, yeah, I've actually done those things. And I always have to check myself. I'm not that kind of person anyway, where, things go to my head. That's not, but I do often kind of go, how has this happened? I'm just me.
Well, you got enough people around you to keep your feet firmly on the ground.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're all taller than me, so it's easy for them to do.
Okay, so you mentioned Margate Soul Festival just gone at the weekend. For anyone watching this into the future, did you get to see Josh and talk with him?
No, I didn't. Josh was on at the same time.
Josh Milan. We're talking about obviously Josh Milan.
Yeah, he was on at the same time when I was on, and in a different venue, which would have been quite difficult for me to get to. But I'm hoping to catch up with him at We Out Here this coming weekend. I think he's playing on Sunday, so I'm hoping I'll catch up with him.
Okay. So they must be in the UK the whole week then, because they were at 51st State, weren't they, on Saturday?
Yeah. He's got Pizza Express on the Saturday.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm hoping to. It would be shameful if he arrives and I don't get to see him. He met up with my cousin because my cousin was doing filming for him, Richard.
Mm-hmm. So, well, yeah, that was something that came about. Richard and I have been friends for a long time, way back. Even when I was playing for Soul Heaven at the Ministry of Sound, I was supporting some of his early productions, and then obviously now with him doing the videography. And he said, yes, cuz I'm looking forward to this. I'm like, are you guys actually, yeah, they've got the same name. Are you related?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's cool.
It's the Lin name. It's actually Chinese. So my relatives, my father was half Chinese, and my Chinese relatives are part of what's known as the Hakka tribe, which were all merchants from China. And they kind of merged out into the world. So I have there's lots of fighters with the Lin name. So Richard's son, Louis, is a professional boxer. He's doing very, very well indeed. He's coming out of injury and he's doing really, really well. I also have a kickboxing champion. Her name's just gone out of my head. How weird is that? That is so weird. She will kick me in the head. But she's a kickboxing champion. And another cousin called Vincent Lin. He's he is a master of what's known as Hung Gar, which is a derivative of Wing Chun. But he's also a Hong Kong movie star and a concert pianist. Plays at Carnegie Hall and Royal Albert Hall.
So when you said about a very talented and widely versed family, you weren't joking, right?
Yeah, we are. We just don't know what it is.
Okay, so let's get back to yourself, Music Without Labels, and start wrapping this conversation up. Are there any parts that you expected us to talk about that we haven't really covered, or any points that you feel you wanted to discuss, any topics that you've seen me talk to others about over the months that you wanted to put right, or how do we end this conversation?
All right, okay, well, if you hold on 1 second, computer, lounge light on. Okay. I noticed it was getting a bit dark.
Hold on 1 second. Computer. No, I haven't really got it.
Mental health.
Okay.
I think mental health in this day and age is very important, and I think growth and self-discovery is very important. It's something that I I encourage people to do wherever possible. I'm not trained, but because I've been on my own journey, I'm happy to pass on information and certainly techniques for handling anxiety and various other things. Um, I think that's very, very important. So, my struggles with my close friends and my family, they're very aware of it. I'm not very public about such things, not for any reason other than I try to blend in, which is a really strange thing to say when you DJ. But I've always tried to just blend in, kind of be normal. I don't want to stand out from the crowd, but it's very difficult for me, particularly in my latter years that I'm using a wheelchair again. It's hard not to stand out. Uh-huh. And lots of my struggles, be it health or mental health wise, I don't put out in the social forum. I can discuss it with my close friends and my family. I'm happy to do that. But I'm also aware when people are aware of your struggles and they see that you're still actively out there, it can give them a bit of a boost. So I think I think if someone actually said, if you've got seconds to die, what would you want to be remembered for? And I'd like to think it's helping people.
Mm-hmm. So may I ask you then, the fact that you say you want to blend in, you don't want to be noticed, only because I completely relate to that, which is why I'm in front of this camera now, speaking to learned people who forced me to get out of my own way and get in front of this camera and have these kind of conversations, because there was a fear of deep down inside of criticism, rejection, whatever. That's something that I learnt about myself, and possibly could be there for yourself as well. Think about all of the more things that you could achieve, because you are a hugely inspirational character. You've got, as I said, you've earned your stripes. You've got the experience. People will listen to you. Were you going to say something to what I was saying there?
Yeah, I think is struggle's the right word. Yeah, I think we all have a blockage, and when you do, it's very easy to label yourself. Here's that labels thing again. It's very easy to say, well, that's the way I am, rather than actually, why am I that way in terms of our behavior? And I think it's important that we should all challenge ourselves. If you react to something in a particular way, there's nothing wrong with having a dark side. So if you have one of those days where you think, for heaven's sake, why are these people driving on the road in this way? Whatever it is, it's fine to be that. We're human. It's fine to feel. But if you're overreacting or reacting to every single thing, you do have to look at yourself and just think, why am I behaving in that way? And I think once we actually start digging and you discover the reasons why, that is the big thing, because then you're then at the crossroads of saying, okay, I know why I do that. Do I continue to do that now? Or do I think, well, no, I want to correct that because that's not actually me. And I think that's one of the things that I like to pass on to people. Not everyone wants to do it. Not everyone gets it. And there's a big cost involved, because the more you dig and find yourself, the less you will have in terms of people around you. That's one of the costs, because the higher you go, they get left behind.
Uh-huh. I agree. I definitely agree. And I also believe that this is opening up a whole different conversation that you and I will have on a whole different stream, because I would like this to remain completely focused on you, your ability as an incredible DJ, an incredible music selector. Your friends have been here throughout. Thank you, Jane, for your very lovely words about this conversation. So yeah, we will have that conversation. We'll get deep in another chat. But for now, just for any people on my network who may not be familiar with yourself, let us know exactly where they can find you, and they can listen to your. Tell us again, the Dark Lord of what?
Of Wonky. My
Dark
affectionate name. Yeah, it's really the selection of music that I have, which is so different from the norm. That it was labelled. I think it was Jane Whittingham and Paul Fawcett that came up with that, the Dark Lord of Wonky. But yeah, you can find me every Tuesday from 6 till 8 on soulpower-radio.com and on Totally Wild Radio from 5 till 7 on the first and the third Sunday of each month. And my next live appearance will be at the Brighton Weekender in October 23rd, 24th, 25th, I think, if I got those dates right.
Okay, so, yeah. Wonderful. Well, I will be sure to transcribe those links into the description of this conversation. And the only way I can end is just by saying thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for being such a huge supporter of the channel. It has been my pleasure to provide you the platform to share your own story, albeit ever so slightly. And just remind me again how old you were this year.
This year? Yeah, I think I'll be the same age as my tongue. Yeah.
I knew there was no way we are going to get it. Right, the only way I'm going to end this is just by saying thank you, my friend. I'm going to say a couple of words to everyone watching. Thank you again.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And I like what you do, Andy. That's why I watch.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
And there goes Dave. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and thank you, all of his friends, for being here. So, at the beginning of the chat, I did give a very brief rundown on why I do these interviews, what I have hoped to achieve, and we will continue to talk to different people. I like to focus on people from my own background, filling in the gaps, so to speak, because I have got a very broken memory. And, as the years progress, it is more and more difficult to try and remember everything that went on. As you can see here, if you aren't a fan of the page, of the channel, then click that like button. What that does is every time I load new videos, YouTube will give you a notification that there's something else that you can check out. And also by subscribing, it will help me show up in the timeline of some of your friends to let them know they may want to see it as well. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jane. All the rest of the crew that come back, and I'm sure will be commenting on a regular basis. Let me say, if you have enjoyed the stream and you want to get your name at the bottom on rotation with the rest of the logos you've been seeing and the rest of the names, then in a couple of weeks I am going to be putting on a whole new concerted effort to get more people join my access program. It's just a tenner a month, and you could possibly walk away with 300 quid prize money. More information on that can be found on my website. You can see a list of the names here on the right hand side. And if you need any websites or anything else, I'm your man.